you?
Good, Leon. How you doing, baby?
I'm good. You cracked a rib some weeks ago.
What I do?
You cracked a rib. Your rib.
Oh, yeah. That's why it's easier to sit this way.
Okay.
You know, it's all right.
Is it already time for the, you should have seen the other guy remark?
This is a stupid thing.
Okay. This whole promotion of your book is turning into what you've been doing your whole life, a tour.
Yeah, finally, getting back on the road. It feels good, let me tell you. You know, 2 years, man.
Yeah.
It's the longest I've ever been home. My dog loved it. My wife, yeah. She's like, maybe it's time to get back on the road, you know.
Yeah. But is that true? Because I remember, like, in the 90s, we talked about this once. You once said that, like, you did nothing. You just walked your dog for 10 years.
That's true. That's true.
You call that the last decade in your book, 7 years in the desert.
True.
Do you still think about those years?
Well, going back and looking at what I was doing, I actually, you know, in my mind, I remembered it as being a lost decade because it was the first time in my life I had no mission. I had no plan, you know, at all. By looking back now, you know, when I went back to write the book, I did quite a lot of things in that decade for it being a lost decade, you know. But, you know, I was just kind of, you know, I had separated from the music business at that point and was not sure what was coming next. So, waiting for that magical phone call from David Chase to become an actor. And before that happened, I was walking my dog for 7 years.
When you describe your childhood in your book, you use the word happy. There are a lot of words a lot of musicians use for their childhood, but happy isn't one of the most common ones.
Yeah.
Could you describe like a regular day in your childhood?
How far back you want to go? All the way?
All the way.
I don't remember my real father at all. So I don't know when my mother got divorced. I think I must have been maybe 2 or 3. And then we moved in with her parents, you know, my Italian grandparents, and there were still the aunts and uncles living in the house. So I was raised, you know, I was the first of all, I was the first grandchild, which in, you know, the Italian family, that's like, forget it, you know. You have divinity already. And I was raised by, I mean, you know, you've heard the expression, it takes a village to raise a child. I had a whole village of Goombas. I had a whole Italian village. And, you know, it was nice. And then moved to Jersey. My mother remarried a Dutch guy named Leon Van Zandt. That's where I got the name. And we moved to Jersey, and even then, you know, it was nice. You know, moved to the suburbs. Mm-hmm. And I remember, you know, the suburbs were just being invented in those days, and they had, you know, neighborhoods, and we were one of the first families into the neighborhood. And I remember playing in those big dirt mounds, which would become houses, with a black kid my age, who was the son of a contractor. And, you know, it was all good, really, up until the Beatles came. And then the problems began, you know, because it was just like, whoa, you know, what a revelation that was. And I realized, you know, that's my destiny, to be in a band, and goodbye schoolwork, and goodbye, you know, parental relationships. And, you know, from there it got weird, you know, for a while.
Yeah.
You know.
I counted the name Beatles in your book. It's 69 times in your book, the Beatles. That's more than Bruce, even more than Maureen.
Yeah.
That's sort of...
Don't mention that to Maureen if you don't mind. You can tell Bruce, I don't care.
But they were really, really important to you. And during your last tour, the Summer of Sorcery tour, you did this one show in a cavern club where you played songs from the Beatles and songs that the Beatles play themselves in that club. What did you learn about the brilliance of the Beatles by playing the Beatles?
You know, that's a true statement. You don't really, no matter how many times you hear something, you know, and I mean, I've heard things thousands of times, you don't really understand it completely till you play it. And then you fully, you know, you appreciate them all over again. Just the genius of the simplest things. And even the cover songs, you know. They were one of the great cover bands, them and the Stones, you know, the two greatest cover bands in history. And, you know, and just taking those original R&B songs, you know, and in some cases improving on them. You know, it's really not easy to do. And you realize that when you're playing the songs, it's just really, it was so much fun to play that place. You know, they had they had a second room there now at the cavern. It's a big room where Paul McCartney played himself. They assumed I wanted to play there because I have a 14-piece band.
Yeah.
But I had to have those arches, man. You know, we grew up seeing one film of the Beatles, playing some other guy at the cavern. There's only one that exists that I know of. And it's a very, very narrow, it was a very narrow club with an archway. And they rebuilt that almost exactly. I said, no, I have to have the archway, you know. So we put the girls and the horns in the hallway. We barely fit the rhythm section on that stage. Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. It's in the video.
Yeah.
I think it might be part of the Soulfire. Part of the Soulfire or Summer, I'm not sure which. We put both of the tours were released as live DVDs. I'm not sure which that's attached to, but.
You said if you wrote in your book that you saw the Beatles, that was a big revelation, but you also thought they were like too perfect.
Yeah, when we first saw them, February 9th, 1964, it was a variety show that the whole family would watch on Sunday night. And they were this spectacular, brand new idea, the whole idea of a band. There were very few bands in America. If you went to your high school dance, it was an instrumental band that played, you know. Very few singing and playing, and nothing really communicating the way they did. So there they were. Now we discovered them halfway through the career. They were together since like 57 and gone in 69. So, you know, so here it is 64. And by then they were just ridiculously good. Very sophisticated, you know, perfect harmony, hair, clothes, the whole bit. So you couldn't really, you know, you looked at them and thought, wow, this is a whole fascinating new world to discover. But you didn't think, well, I can do that. You know, maybe I can do that. Luckily, 4 months later, the Rolling Stones came. And very, very important. That's why I always say both, you know, the yin and yang. The Stones were dressed the way they felt like. You know, they'd given up on trying to look the same.
Yeah.
The hair wasn't perfect except for Brian Jones. No harmony at all. You know, they made it look easier than it was. You know, they're very casual. They're really the first punk band, actually. You know, and they made it look easier than it was. So you thought, well, I can't do that, but maybe I could do that. You know, and in the end, you know, I think it was the combination of the two that really propelled you towards doing it. You know.
Yeah. And you did it. You wrote a book in your first band. It was called The Mates.
Oh, that was one of the early ones. Yeah, the first one was the Shadows, then the Mates, then my band, when I took over as lead guitar and band leader was the Source.
Yeah. What is the reason that we are not sitting here and introduce you as Little Steven from The Mates?
You know, you have a lot of different bands when you're a kid. And that was one of them, you know.
That's the whole story.
Yeah. I mean, I was a singer at first. The first thing I did was just front. I fronted the band, both the Shadows and the Mates. I was a singer. And then I learned how to play guitar, and I continued to be the singer, but also playing guitar.
Yeah. And after those two came, you said it already, the source, and you put an article on the source in your book, and it says, I'm going to quote it, it was an article saying that you're going to perform, and after the show, the popular group will blow up their equipment with smoke and time bombs. At least that's what they say is going to happen. Did that happen?
Yes, we did it. I was, very influenced by The Who at that point, obviously. I don't know how many times we did that. Not too many times, because, it's expensive breaking your equipment. But we did it a few times, I think. Yeah, I just thought The Who was amazing, back then. I still think their first album, the best album. It's amazing. I played it for my music teacher in music class was a very nice lady, and they started to realize that the old music was gonna not be relevant anymore. It was right at that moment, and so she let me bring in the first Who album and play it for the class. So
that's cool.
That was cool, yeah.
Yeah. As someone who loves his instrument, is it nice to do? Like destroy everything on stage?
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. You get a lot of pent-up frustration when you're that age. Still do, actually.
Yeah. And what was your biggest dream at that moment in time?
Well, there's only one dream, which is trying to make a living playing rock and roll, which was impossible. Seemed impossible, and was a struggle for us. I mean, we didn't really succeed for 15 years. The longest. I'm sure the longest gestation period for success in the history of rock music. We really, we started playing in '65 and didn't really make it till 1980, with the fifth album, At the point where we said, oh, okay, now we can make a living doing this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I left like a punch.
Yeah. But what is that? Is that patience or perseverance or knowing that one day it will happen or?
No, it's being completely unable to do anything else.
Okay.
You are just a loser, a bum, a vagrant, a misfit freak, and an outcast. And luckily there was two of us, so, you figure if you're the only freak in town, you think, well, maybe it's me. But if there's two of you, and that's what bonded me and Bruce together to this day.
Yeah.
We were the only two people who really felt that rock and roll was everything. And that was a weird thing to feel in those days. It wasn't a business until the 70s, It was really the Wild West at that point. And nobody, first of all, that first year, you had to be English to be a rock star. I mean, there was no such thing as anything else. That first, when the British invasion first came, until when we took back the charts in summer of '65 with folk rock. Then folk rock started with the Byrds and Bob Dylan and all those guys. But up until then, it was nothing but British, and of course soul music, which survived and flourished during the British invasion, which was interesting, actually. You look back at those TV shows, and we had a lot of them. It's hard to imagine, but we had 7 or 8 rock and roll TV shows on every week. Can you imagine? Wow. And every one of them. And same thing in England. It may have been the same thing here. I don't know. But, the Rolling Stones would come on, and then Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Then the Kinks would come on, and then Curtis Mayfield. Rock, soul, rock, soul, rock, soul. Virtually every single rock TV show. It's interesting, So we grew up with that rock and soul side by side the whole '60s. Yeah.
You write, of course, in your book about that first moment that you met Bruce at Café Wa, where bands were playing, and you described your first conversation. That was, you said, "What are you doing here?" And Bruce said, "I'm here to see stuff." And then you said, "Yeah, me too." That was it. That was the whole conversation.
Well, Well, no, the first conversation was at a Hullabaloo club, which Hullabaloo was one of the TV shows that was on. You know, if you would have asked me how long those TV shows were on, I would have said 10 years. But actually, Hullabaloo and Shindig, which are the two biggest ones, were only on it for a year and a half. You know, it was time was different in those days. A whole lot happened very, very quickly. I mean, a lot, you know. So the first time we met, he came into a Hullabaloo club when I was still in my first band, singing. And we had a short conversation like that. But then on weekends, I would go up to the Café Wa in Greenwich Village, which was an hour on a bus. And, you know, because those bands were a year ahead of New Jersey. So I'd go up there to steal things and use them in my band. And I ran into him doing the same thing. And that was odd, to run into somebody, you know, in a different town, an hour and 15 minutes away. You know, it occurred to us that, you know, we're both from the same tribe, you know, and we became more friendly, and we started to go up to New York together.
Yeah.
You know, so from there we became much closer friends. But yeah, that was the difference between just being another local band. You know, suddenly we're both going up there, reaching for greatness, you know, as much as we can steal.
Mm-hmm. And did you talk a lot about what you wanted to do, or did you just do it?
No, we talked about it nonstop. That's all we talked about. That's all there was to talk about with music, you know? We would talk about, you know, the latest Beatles album versus the latest Stones album. We'd talk about who's better, the Jeff Beck group or Led Zeppelin. You know, we would talk about all those kinds of things constantly.
It's kind of nerdy also.
Oh yeah. No, we were nerdy, you know. in that, you know, opposite of, you know, not technical nerds.
No.
You know, technological. You know, but yeah, we were music nerds for sure.
You said you left in the '80s to start your own career. I want to talk about your first solo albums. I want to begin with this one, with "Man Without Women." You said in your book, you write, if I could like redo it, I would add some guitars and some vocals, but it was the most earnest representation of who I was at that time and where I was. Where was that, and who were you at that time?
Well, it was unclear at first. The idea at first was just have a solo album. I'm not sure I'd even decided to leave the E Street Band yet. And I said, well, if I'm going to do a solo album, I wonder what it would be. And I decided if I'm going to do that, I would eventually be the political guy. That would be my identity, because everybody needed an identity in those days. And especially growing up in the 60s, in that Renaissance period, everybody had a very distinct identity. Then the 70s came, and the monoculture fragmented into 1,000 pieces. But even in the 70s, you had to have a distinct, even the hybrids had to have their own identity, you know? So I grew up with that. And I said, well, if I'm gonna make solo records, who am I gonna be? You know, how do I justify my existence? I don't think the world needs love songs from a sideman, you know? But I said, okay, let the first album then be an introduction of myself as an artist. But I'm going to start, the first song will be an indication of where I'm going, which was A Lion in a Bed of Fire, which talks about specifically politics. And you know, all the other succeeding albums would be much more obviously political. But the first one was kind of an introduction of myself. You know, like I said, it wasn't until probably after the second album that I really decided to leave at that point.
Yeah, that was this one, Voice of America. It includes maybe one of your, say, most important songs, I Am a Patriot. Jackson Browne covered it. Pearl Jam covers it. Last time Eddie Vedder played here in Holland, he played it also. At that time, you were the headliner of a big festival in Germany called Rockpalast. And before you play that song, I Am a Patriot, you said to the audience, I want to apologize for my government's arrogance and my people's ignorance. That was a bold statement.
Oh, I was full of bold statements in those days. I was not holding anything back.
No.
You know, I was very, very, very political, very committed at that point. You know, I realized that at some point it occurred to me that I'd made a big mistake leaving the E Street Band. I really I didn't just change jobs. I ended my life. My life had been heading towards the miracle of a successful career in rock and roll. And after 15 years of work, 15, we finally make it, and I walk away, and it finally hit me, actually on my trip down to South Africa, hit me on the plane that I just had ended my life. And the result of that, you know, the consequence, you know, it caused me to become even more committed politically, because I figured, you know, if I'm now that guy's dead, and now I have to be reborn, and this guy better get something done to justify this incredible move. And so I was doubly committed and completely fearless at that point, and I was, you know, I was very focused on politics, and was not going to hold back in any way. You know?
No. It was the same period, like Bruce recorded in that period the song Born in the USA. It seems like both your ideas about the world and your view on your own country changed in sort of the same period.
Yeah, it was funny. It wasn't funny at the time, but I didn't realize he was going to call the album that. So I put out Voice of America, you know, red, white, and blue, the flags everywhere, and you know. And then like 2 months later, out comes Born in the USA, red, white, and blue everywhere, and flags everywhere. And of course, my album was completely squashed. So it was really a legitimate coincidence. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it really was. And he was about to become more political at that point, but I was fully political at that point.
Yeah. You also released a single in that time for the 1984 American elections. It was this one, Vote That Mother Out. It was your song about Ronald Reagan. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much enthusiasm did your record company had when you said, "This is my new single"?
Well, I got away with it, you know. I don't know how heavily it was promoted, but yeah, I almost redid it for the 2020 election. Came very close, very close. Talk about embarrassment. But anyway, it was, yeah. And that was that the one with the rap song on the other side?
No, it's I'm a Patriot on the B side.
Oh, okay.
No.
Which one was that? I don't know.
He knows everything. Daniel, which one was that?
12-inch. It's a limited 12-inch version of that.
You see?
There's a rap.
It's on there?
Yeah.
Ah.
It's got a totally different.
I was trying to find Melly Mel to do it, but I wouldn't meet him for another year when we did Sun City. Yeah, so I did my one and only rap song. Yeah.
Yeah.
After World War III, it's called.
After Voice of America came this one, Freedom No Compromise. You did something very interesting on that record. Not only did you sing about the racist regime in South Africa and the oppression of labor and of the unions in Latin America, but you sang from the perspective of the oppressed. That's really interesting, especially now, because identity is such a big theme these days, that you chose to change your perspective and change your identity in those songs.
Well, it's just, you know, it was an artistic device. I actually started it with the two reggae songs from Voice of America, actually. I'm a Patriot and Solidarity were both done in the character other than me. Every singer is an actor, and you're acting out the script, which is that song. Most of the time, it feels autobiographical. We have a very autobiographical art form, but much of it is not necessarily. In my case, it was completely autobiographical, but in many cases it's not. It just seems like it because the singer is very good selling you, on the song, right? So to play a slightly different character, it was not that big a reach, and I found it very, very effective because I stared at that "I Am a Patriot" title for like a year. I knew I had to write it because I was going to be very, very critical of the government. And I wanted it to be clear I was doing that from a patriotic point of view. It was very difficult to write, and I finally figured out a way to do it by being this other character, So I used it again and also on Los Desaparecidos, actually.
Yeah.
The mother explaining to her son why the father's not coming home, And that same son would grow up and be the guy in Bitter Fruit,
yeah.
On the next album, so that was also done in character, Pretoria, Native American, So I really used it quite a bit on Freedom, and it's just a device, to communicate the ideas.
And were rock and reggae the best ways to communicate that ideas? Because the soul was, you could say the soul was kind of gone, and it was rock now and sometimes reggae.
Yeah, and I talk about this in the book, which genres kind of, their specialties, And I think in the end, I decided rock and reggae, and hip hop, actually, are the best ways that most of the time spend a lot of the time communicating substance. And that doesn't mean the other genres can't, but they just mostly don't. Of course, nobody does anymore. But in those years of 60s, 70s, 80s, it was rock and reggae mostly communicating substance. It's just it's why I spent the last 20, 25 years saving the endangered species of rock and roll. That's why I started my radio formats.
Yeah.
That's why I started my record company. That's why I started, the foundation, which is teaching, rock and roll in schools.
Yeah, teach rock.
And everything I've done basically over the last 20, 25 years has been to preserve and make the greatest music ever made accessible for future generations. I feel that strongly about it, and especially the Renaissance period of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where most of the seminal work happened. It should be accessible for future generations. I feel very strongly about that. I miss it. You don't hear, people are not communicating substance anymore very, very often. Why? Because rock is gone. That's why. It's dead in the industry. Now we're still the biggest thing live, thankfully, if we ever get back to being live again. But there's no more rock hits.
No.
They're gone for a long time. So we're back to being a cult. Maybe that's where we belong. But you want it to be a healthy cult, that they can survive.
Yeah.
And pass along information occasionally that is important. So everything I've done is try to keep that healthy, make that cult healthier.
There was one other genre you touched on. It was funk. That was this album, 1989, Revolution. The world was changing. The Berlin Wall went down. We sang about it in Checkpoint Charlie. Green parties were getting voted in the parliaments all over the world. And there was the sense that we were killing our environment. And this is the sense you sing about on the album. Color this revolution green. Let's get everybody a piece of the dream. But on a funk album, with a lot of electronical influences. Why was funk the best way to approach this message?
Well, at that point, I decided rock isn't necessarily the most international of the genres of music, you know. Reggae certainly was. So I could have gone in that direction. But I wasn't in the mood to do an entire album of reggae. You know, maybe I should have. Those are my two most successful songs, I think, The Solidarity and Patriot. But I had gotten into funk at that point. I loved it, and I thought that was, you know, a little bit more international, a little bit more relatable to the masses. And it was a message I was trying to convey, a pro-environment message back then in '89. Mm-hmm. I thought the environment was you know, in big trouble then, and trying to, you know, connect to people in a different way. Every album was different. Every single one of my albums was a completely different genre, really.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why, you know, don't try this at home, kids, because you're not going to have a career if you do that, you know. But I didn't care. I was not looking at it as a career, which was very naive, obviously, but I was looking at it as an artistic adventure, and every single album had a different theme, and the music was just a soundtrack. So all 5 of those records in the '80s were completely different, according to the themes of those particular albums. In this case, I had a whole concept that the human voice was going to be the only thing human on the record. Because, you know, I had always been very traditional, really a traditionalist. So I thought, well, maybe I'm afraid of this technology. Let me jump in and embrace it.
Embrace,
you know?
yeah.
You know, and I really did, and we did the basic tracks, creating samples and things that were, you know, a new idea at the time, and then you know, 3/4 of the way through, I kind of got bored with it. I was like, you know, this is becoming an intellectual exercise rather than something I'm really, really feeling, you know. So it's fine as it is. I just put it out as it was. It was really kind of 3/4 finished in some ways, but it holds its own. I mean, you listen to it now, it sounds like Bruno Mars' next album.
Yeah. A lot, let's say, not all of the audience you had understood that album. Is that the price you sometimes have to pay as an artist? That you alienate a part of your audience for maybe a few years and then maybe they come back or not?
Well, yeah, no, it was probably a mistake in that sense. Because even though the first 3 records were different from each other, there was a building process going on. You know, the audience was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and yeah, my audience did not really understand that record, and you know, it's probably a mistake in terms of stretching too far. You know, but I wasn't looking at it that way, which is the correct way to look at it. But I was just looking at it like I'm into this, and I'm gonna go for it and make as cool a funk record as I can make, and see what happens. You know, see if it reaches a more international audience, and see what happens with it. You're constantly looking for that common ground. You know, it's my whole life. You know, that's what the title's about, the book, you know, and not finding it. You know, you're looking, and you're trying this, you try that. Not that it's the opposite of compromising. You know, you're trying to do what you feel at that moment, but you hope it will reach people in some new way. And I think up until then it was building, and then it stopped. And I would quit after that. I would go home and finish, because I had outlined 5 albums when I started. I would go home and finish the 5th one, which was Born Again Savage, but I wouldn't tour with it. That was the end of that was the end of the music career, as it was, so-called career, which I go into great detail about it. But it was, you know, it was just time to, you know, after 5 records. I just hadn't found an audience, and it was getting more and more difficult to keep it together. So I just walked away.
Yeah. It was
from my second career. That's two walkaways.
This is also a great record, and it's really it was a three-piece band. What band? It was you on guitar, it was Adam Clayton on bass, and Jason Bonham on drums. From a big Disciples of Soul, like 12-piece band, back to
Yeah, I had really gotten very far as I became a frontman. You know, being a frontman was never my inclination, even though I started off as one. And you know, I had my own bands for a long time, and you know, I was good at it. And then when I started my solo career in the '80s, I had to learn how to be a frontman all over again. And again, by '87, '88, '89, I had gotten quite good at it. But by then, you know, when you start to become a frontman in your head, you stop being a guitar player. So I was playing less and less guitar every tour until I barely was playing. Suddenly, after you know this experiment with technology and fronting for 2 tours mostly, I started to miss the guitar again. So I came home and wrote 2 albums. One was my '60s hard rock record, which is Born Again Savage, and the other one was an album called Nobody Loves and Leaves Alive by the Lost Boys, which is more of a traditional mid-'60s kind of Stonesy kind of album, which I've never released yet. I haven't released that yet, and I will when I can really promote it properly, you know. But I don't want to just throw it out there. It's too important. It's one of my favorite albums I've ever done, and I don't want to just throw it out there. But this one was very definitive in terms of the subject matter. I mean, I didn't have to write a book. It's all in this Born Again Savage album, actually.
This is the record I would have made in 1969 had I been capable. It's your first line.
Yeah, because it was, you know, I love. Part of me loved that whole. Depending on where you want to start, you know, Kinks, Who, you know, Yardbirds, Jeff Beck group, or Cream, Jeff Beck group, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix in there, you know, that whole thing, that particular hard rock genre where it started, I loved it, and finally, I only did it. It was you know, I ran into Adam Clayton in a club, and we're just shooting the shit. You know, what are you doing? I said, well, I got a bunch of stuff on the shelf. I don't know what to do with it. And he's like, I got some time off. Let's go do it, you know. So Adam Clayton is completely responsible for that record. It wouldn't exist, you know. And we got, you know, I said, well, who would be a great drummer for a '60s hard rock record? How about John Bonham's son? Yeah, that's a good idea. And we didn't know him. We just called him up, and he was into it. And he's just, you know, they're both playing fantastic on there. And you know, I added a second guitar, sometimes a third guitar. Well, all the songs have at least 3 guitars. So what I recorded, I call it big mono. I do a big rhythm guitar, and I just put it on the left, and I would double it and put it way on the right. So it's technically stereo, but actually it just sounds like big mono, you know. And then a lead guitar in the middle. So, you know, it wasn't technically 3-piece. And no 3-piece, you know, as I've said, all 3-piece bands are a fraud, you know, because nobody records that way. You know, there's three songs I can think of in history that actually have 3 instruments on them. You know, very few. Anyways, but it was that style, that 3-piece style of hard rock that I always wanted. I grew up loving. You know?
Yeah. You as a fan, do you like it when an artist changes his sound every album? How loyal are you? If you
No. No. I like the Rolling Stones and the Ramones. You know, the 10th album sounds like the first album. You know, I envy that. I just didn't see myself as that kind of artist. First of all, I'm a band guy, so just being a solo artist was already weird, you know, so you're kind of finding your way and eliminating those band rules, you know, which maybe I should have followed. But, you know, the band rules are, you know, find your identity and keep it, maintain it. You know, you can stretch a little bit here, a little bit there, you know, and you know, and this is one thing I do talk about in the book that the Beatles really don't get enough credit for, which is inventing the concept of evolution. But even though, but even then they stayed within a certain lane. They were kept, intact by George Martin, their producer, I'm sure. But the Beatles were the first group to make every record slightly different and slightly, well, I don't want to say better necessarily, but different. And that was a new idea that nobody had ever done. You had a hit in those days. It was a miracle to have a hit. And your job was to have the second hit as close to that first hit as you could do, And the Beatles, I think just out of boredom, because they've been around for so long, playing 6 sets a night in Hamburg. 7 nights a week for months. Try that one. They and playing every song that was available. That's why all the bands in Liverpool, that's why they ended up starting to write songs, because they're all playing the same songs. There was a limited amount of rock and roll records out at that time in the 50s, and they all knew every single record, and they played every single song, and that's why they absorbed those things, playing them night after night after night. That same thing, absorbing. So when they started writing, they started, let's do something new with the bridge. We can't do the same old thing. So they started, coming up with these really interesting chord changes, and I think that led to each album evolving. And Bob Dylan followed, and the Stones followed, and the Who followed. Everybody started to follow that concept of, it had become an art form in '65, which meant that these kinds of things were now in play. Not only personal expression, but also evolving the art form, seeing where it went. But even with all that, they never went too far and completely lost the audience. They come out with things that were surprising. I remember thinking I didn't understand Eleanor Rigby when I first heard it. And it wasn't until a year or two later you realize the genius of it. So they'd occasionally go pretty far out there, but mostly stayed within the relatable identity, which was the way to go. But I just threw those rules out the window, and was just it was all about the themes. It was all about the subject matter, and I didn't really pay much attention to that consistency. So it obviously did not work. You're not going to reach a common ground, an audience that way, because it's a different audience every album in some ways. So.
You were referring to that phone call you got at the end of the 90s from David Chase about the Sopranos. Would you say that acting was something completely new for you? Or would you say it's just another version of something you were doing for years, like performing on stage? In your book, you say every singer is also an actor.
Yeah, I believe that's true. You may not be conscious of it necessarily, but that's what you're doing. You're selling people that identity of the guy in that song. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's not. But I mean, who's better than Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley? Never wrote a note. But they're like completely convincing. As singers. So, I guess that was helpful. But, the craft of acting for real, is a little bit more intense than just taking on the character in a song.
And what made David Chase so convinced that you were the man for that job without any experience in acting?
Well, he's a crazy motherfucker. That's
all right.
That's the bottom line. Okay, he's nuts. He had been in TV his whole life, and he didn't want to do it anymore. This was going to be his last show. He wanted to do movies, get into movie making, and so he was going to break every rule in the book. And Sopranos really did break every rule in the book, and he wanted new faces. So he saw me. And he was a fan already. I mean, he not only was an E Street fan, but he had my solo records too. And he was relating to, me on stage, I guess, with the Disciples of Soul, but also relating to the E Street Band as the rock and roll Rat Pack. Me as Dean Martin and Clarence as Sammy on steroids. We were never a faceless, nameless sidemen. We were always characters, and I think he was responding to that. Felt I could do it. I turned him down. I said no, thanks. And he's like, "What do you mean no? I want you to be in my new TV show." I'm like, "Look, I'd love to do it, but I'm not an actor." And he's like, "Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Come on down." So I frankly had nothing better to do. So, at that point I was just walking my dog, and I went down, and.
And how long did it took for you to realize yourself? Yeah, I'm an actor.
Well, it's something you continue to craft is something that you never stop learning. But I really you get better. I got better every season and every scene. Especially with that group. Jimmy Gandolfini, one of the greatest actors of all time. I said it many times. You do a scene with Jimmy and you walk away a better actor. And that was 10 years. 7 seasons in 10 years. So. You're getting better and better, and then I really used everything I knew on Lilyhammer. I think at Lilyhammer I really became, an actor that really knew what he was doing, and the reason was I didn't have time to think about it because I was co-writing it and co-producing it, and I was the only writer on the set, so you're busy, fixing lighting or looking at people's wardrobe, or I'm writing the script until the director yells action, and then boom, you're in the scene. And I never had time to think about the acting in Lilyhammer, so it's very, very natural. And I think I really took a big step forward at that point. But it's a craft you keep on learning.
And do characters like Silvio and Frank the Fixer, do they crawl under your skin, or do you leave Sil and Frank on the set once the day is over?
I wish I could bring him with me to business meetings, I tell you that. Oh, I get a lot more done. My theory that I had to come up with a theory. I observed my wife. My wife took acting classes for years, and
she played your wife in The Sopranos.
She started playing my wife in The Sopranos. But I had heard all the theories from her, because she was with some very heavy teachers, and some things I agreed with, some things I didn't. But I just I had to come up with my own theory in order to do it. So I came up with the idea that every characteristic of humankind is present in all of us, and the job of the actor is to find the characteristics that are appropriate for that character and for that scene, and inhabit those characteristics, and bring them to life. So once you do that, you are bringing certain characteristics to life in your own head. But I'm not a method guy. Method is a complete immersion in a character.
Yeah.
Those are people that stay in character during the day, and want to be called by the name of the character and all that. I was not one of those. I could shut it off just like that, or turn it on just like that. Maybe it's because I'm still in the early stages of the craft, but I could leave them mostly on the set,
And do people approach you different when you're an actor? I mean, there was this scene in The Sopranos, it came back a few times, if the guys wanted to have a laugh, they would ask you to do I thought I was out and they pulled me back in.
Al Pacino?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine if you go to a party, nobody says, "Hey, you're a singer, please sing me a song." But do people ask you to do that line if you...
Yeah, all the time, yes.
Oh, really?
All the time. Yeah. I got to say, man, the power of TV was... something you read about and, you think about it. At that point, I had been a rock star for 25 years, right? I walked down the street after 2 episodes are on, and I'm not exactly recognizable immediately in the show. 2 episodes, everybody on the street talking about Sopranos. Stop me on the street. Forget about rock star, forget it. You know, soprano, soprano, soprano. You know, and I was like, oh man, the power of TV is truly amazing. You know, you're going into people's living rooms and they feel like they know you, and it's just. It's different than the whole rock thing because you're building an audience one person at a time. I mean, the E Street Band, you know, took us 5 albums, you know, basically. This is instant, and you know, look, it's nice. I've always had that mid-level, comfortable level of celebrity for the most part, which is nice. You know, people say hello on the street. You can always get a table at a restaurant, you know. You don't wait in line. You know, the perks that go with that is nice. But I just found the power of that box, man, of that medium is amazing.
Yeah.
So,
He said people think they know you. They think they know you, or they think they know Sil. Because as Sil, you did horrible things. I mean, you killed Adriana.
I'm telling you. I'm telling you, it's sick, actually, because I have people come to me on the street saying, hey, Sil, good job getting rid of that girl. That bitch had to go. I'm like, she was totally innocent. You know, Sil's the bad guy. I mean, you know, so yes, people relate to the character a little too much sometimes. I guess it's natural. Just, you know, that was the amazing part of Sopranos. I think was David Chase's genius in making it all seem very natural, kind of almost normal, and. You know, there's universal themes and the balance between work and family.
Yeah.
I think everybody could relate to, but he made that work seem kind of normal, and it's very mundane. The actual workings of the modern mob. You know, it ain't the Roaring '20s anymore. Okay, it's, you know, reading the racing form all day, and to make, you know, we really made an effort to not romanticize it, you know, and David Chase went out of his way not to romanticize it. I mean, no fancy camera moves, you know, the lighting was practically cinema verite. I mean, it looked like a documentary half the time, and you know, too many characters, too many subplots. He broke all those rules.
Yeah, it was a revolutionary series, you could say. Did you feel it while you were doing it? I mean, you've been there also with the recording of Born to Run, which was a groundbreaking album. But do you notice that while you're working on it, or is it something you see like years after when you look back?
Well, no. I mean, we didn't. You really don't know it when you're doing it. Not in that case. I mean, the pilot was very eccentric and very weird. It took HBO up until the very last minute to decide to pick up the series. And then, you know, you're doing that first season in the dark. You don't know how people are going to react. But, you know, by the second season, you knew. You know what I mean? You know, at that point, you know, the response was amazing. So you knew then, but not in the beginning, no. Even Born to Run, I knew that song was a huge leap from where he had been. You know, the difference between the second album and third album is, you know, a million miles. But there's so many factors involved that you can't really generalize. You know, you can't say, I'm sure this is a hit. Although I did feel that way about Hungry Heart, I must say, right from the beginning. You know, I thought, you know, and I kept fighting to get it on the album because he kept throwing songs off. And, you know, there goes another hit, there goes a hit, you know, there goes my, you know, I worked for a week on Because the Night, a week, okay? Arranging that song, it's very complicated, you know? And the first time I found out it was not on our record, it was Jimmy Iovine. He says, come on down, I want to play something for you, you know? And then I hear my arrangement sung by Patti Smith. You son of a bitch. I thought that was going to be our breakthrough a breakthrough song. You know, I really did. And it would have fit on Darkness on the Edge of Town, actually. Although, as I wrote the book, I really analyzed that era much more than I did back then, which was fascinating to me. You know, that whole transformation again of his character from Born to Run to Darkness, you know, and finally realized why he was throwing all those songs out. And in the case of Darkness, it made sense actually, but Because the Night would have fit, you know. Anyway.
Did he agree when he read that in the book?
You know, the first thing I did when I finished the book, I sent it to Bruce and I sent it to Bob Dylan. And I said, listen, you know, you guys are in this a lot, and especially Bruce, obviously. And I said, I am determined not to make any Bruce news here, okay? That's not what the book's about. You want a definitive E Street Band book? You're gonna wait for Gary and Max or Roy, you know? I'm not gonna, you know, that's not what I'm interested in. And I said to Bruce and Bob Dylan, because there was a lot of private conversations, and that was half the challenge of the book. You know, how much do you reveal? How much? Because I know way too much. You know, you know, I know everything. You know, and you know, you don't want to talk about. You know, you don't want to violate that kind of trust. You know, so I said to them, any objection whatsoever, okay? If anything bothers you, I mean, the last thing I want with Bruce is some journalist saying, you know, Stevie said this in his book, and you said that in your book, and, you know, what's the matter? You know, who's telling the truth? You know, we may remember things differently, because, you know, we're both nuts, but you know, I said to both of them, and really anything that you object to or remember differently, I will take it out immediately. And neither one of them changed a single word, not a word. So I felt okay about that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Then you got that phone call, Steve, 25 years after your last tour. You got that call if you want to headline a festival, a blues festival in London, and you had to sort of bring the Disciples of Soul back to life. What was your first reaction on that call?
Well, my first reaction was, wow, I haven't done that in a long time, which had been 30 years. But then the more I thought about it, I started to think, well, geez, you know, it might be fun. I mean, I'll bring the horns back, you know, and we can do some Paul Butterfield stuff, because nobody really hears that stuff anymore, especially the Paul Butterfield stuff with horns. I'll do some Electric Flag, you know, nobody's ever heard that stuff. I'll do some blues things with the horns. I'll get a chance to do a little fun blaxploitation. I love blaxploitation. You know, I'll pick one of those songs and do one of those things, and I'll you know, revisit some of my old work, which I haven't listened to in 30 years. You know, so it started to sound like fun. And then I started, you know, got Mark Ribler, who I had chosen to be music director for Darlene Love, and had started to meet some new session guys, because I was out of that world completely. Mark put that band together, and I had a couple of old comrades, Eddie Mannion and Stan Harrison, and Clark Gayton we had used with E Street. But mostly new people. The band was just so good, you know, just a fantastic band. But you know, I started playing some of my old songs, and I was like, wow, you know, this stuff's not bad. You know, it's kind of interesting. Because it was never fashionable, suddenly it becomes timeless.
Yeah.
You know? I was like, wow, this whole rock and soul thing, you know, nobody ever really did it, you know, other than me, and of course, Southside would carry it on.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was a distinctively interesting identity. And so I went back to it, you know, obviously with the horns. And I said, man, these songs have value. They have value. And I think it's worth revisiting them. and it was just sounded so good, man. I said, let's make an album. I got nothing to do. I was about to do a new TV show, and that fell through. Bruce decides to go do Broadway. You know, I had really nothing to do. So I said, let's make an album. I'm not ready to write an album, but let's do an album of songs I've written for other people. You know. And so that was Soulfire. And this guy heard it and says, man, I want to see this on the road. And I'm like, well, it's going to be expensive, obviously. 15 people. And we found a sponsor. And we get on the road with that. And then slowly, you know, new ideas started coming to me out of nowhere. And that turned into Summer of Sorcery, which is my first new music that I wrote for myself in 30 years. And it was really a gift, man, a gift, because I had no intention of going back into the business at all, you know. And suddenly there it was. So
Was it necessary also to make it sort of full circle, to end it with a positive note?
Exactly right, exactly right. Because I didn't even realize myself that I needed that closure, you know?
Yeah.
And I really did. It was revisiting my life's work, which I'd abandoned. And suddenly I'm reconnecting to it, and it really did feel like a very worthwhile thing to do for my own head. And that 17, 18, 19, right before the quarantine, turned out to be the most productive years of my entire life. I mean, we put out not only the 2 new albums, Soulfire and Summer Sorcery, but also 6 album packages.
Yeah.
You know, got the Lilyhammer score out. We got all my 80s stuff remastered. You know, we put out the live DVD shows. You know, and it really felt like you know, I think that's what enabled me to then write the book, because I felt like, okay, that I do have a kind of a beginning and an ending, and that enabled me, I think, to write the book.
In the title song of that last album, Summer of Sorcery, you write, in your Summer of Sorcery, we're going to walk together on a promenade forever and ever. I was thinking about the question of if time is the enemy for you, because in your book you write that you hated to be still a child. You always wanted to grow older. Well, you succeeded.
Too well.
What is your approach of time?
I've always felt like I'm playing catch up, you know, always. A very late, I was a very kind of a slow kid, you know. And I've always felt, you know, I mean, I became an artist in my 30s. I became an actor in my 40s. You know, and I've never felt like I got enough output, you know, enough production. So I always feel like I'm playing catch up, trying to, you know, get more done. And so time's always been an enemy to me. You know, I'm trying to. I mean, that's the only thing people, you know, say, what are you afraid of? I'm only afraid of one thing, which is wasting my time, you know, and that's the only thing that bothers me. So, you know, I'm always feeling like that. You know, but those 3 years, I must say, you know, that's what I call productive years. 6 album packages in 3 years is about as good as you can do. And that's, you know, I'd like to have every year be that productive, you know, but, you know, you can only do what you can do.
A lot of people get sort of, when they grow older, they sort of lay back more. But you seem to be.
No, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. By far, the 3 most productive years of my life were the previous 3 years before the quarantine, you know. And I just, in the end, I wanted the book to reflect the more universal themes than just being a music book for music people. You know, that's how it starts, obviously. You know, kid from New Jersey makes it in rock and roll, and that's a good story, you know. It is, but that's the first half of the book. But then the adventure begins. And the universal themes start to come into play. You know, the search for identity, the search for purpose in life, the search for spiritual enlightenment, you know, the search, you know, every artist at some point must ask themselves, how can I be useful? You know, and those kinds of things. And in the end, you know, everybody is going to experience disappointment and frustration in their lives. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, you know? And that's the title of the book. But it's not the disappointment or the frustration in life that matters. It's what you do after that, you know? That's when you start to really find yourself and find ways of realizing one's potential, and you know, fighting for that justification for existence. I think that can lead to something that's maybe not what you had in mind. It may not be the plan that you originally had. You may be way off over here, but focusing and finding a way to make that productive and useful, I think is the important thing in life that I hope people come away from the book feeling, that, you know, you can end your life. You can end your life, and everything that you've dreamed of can come to an end, and there's still something that can be productive and useful in your life. It's not necessarily the end, even though it seems like the end. But in order to be reborn, one must die. You know, in the old spiritual sense, and you know, I think more people in life, I think, have that happen than not. And I thought, let me focus on that, and hopefully the book will be more useful to people than just some biography about some fucking rock star.
During the Soulfire tour, you talked about on stage every night about all of us seeking sort of spiritual nourishment. Did you find that in music?
Oh, definitely. That's it, absolutely. No, it was religion to me, in every sense of the word. Still is, really. But yeah, my spiritual nourishment came from music. And that's why, you know, you're trying to pass it along, make it accessible to people, because that greatness, that's what my life's all about. My life is all about greatness, seeking it out, supporting it when I can find it, trying to achieve it, trying to create it, you know. But in order to aspire to greatness, one must have access to it. One must understand what it means, you know. And you put the radio on now, you're not going to get it. You know?
Is that why you love teachers so much? Because that is what they do?
Yes. And I thought the most useful thing I can do is to create a music history curriculum, and get that into the school system, and basically just maintain the arts in the DNA of the public education system, because it's gone in America, gone. And that's a crime. For many, many reasons, one of which, kids learn differently when the arts are involved. There's no wrong answers in the arts, you know. Kids come to school with gifts intact, okay? They come with imagination, curiosity, emotion, instinct. And what does our school system do? It squashes those things and suppresses them. We should use them. Use those gifts the kids come with, and that's what our curriculum's all about, you know. And I feel very strongly about that could transform the entire education system, not by having a separate arts class, but by integrating the arts into the disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and math. You know, making STEM into STEAM, you know, in our parlance. You know, adding the A of the arts. It changes, you know, and now we have not only 40,000 teachers teaching it, we have dozens of partner schools adopting it, and the whole state of Connecticut just adopted it, and, you know, it's spreading. And if we can keep spreading it, I think it's going to eventually make a difference, and we'll at least start to affect the dropout rate, which is completely out of control. I mean, 50% of the kids in the poor neighborhoods are dropping out of school, you know, and then 50% of them end up in the criminal justice system. It's not tolerable for a so-called civilized society. I mean, what are we doing, you know? So you know, this is the kind of thing I think that'll change. You know, if kids like one single class, they'll come to school. Yeah. And we want to be that class. You know, we want to be the cool class. But it really does affect the way kids learn, because you're on their turf. You know, go to them. Don't drag them to us and say, learn this now and someday you'll use it. You know, that might have worked with us, but it's not going to work with them.
Did it?
You know, no.
No. Time for questions from the audience. Ik ga even staan. Ga even staan als je vraag wil stellen, dan kan ik je zien. Ja.
If you could give yourself an advice when you were 10-year-old, what would you advise yourself?
Wow. Wow. Well, start playing guitar right then. Don't wait. Pay attention in school. Don't. I didn't learn a thing till I left school. You know, learn craft. Craft, man. The best thing a parent can do, make that kid, I don't care if the kid hates it, make him learn how to play piano, make him learn how to play guitar, make him learn how to do something, some kind of craft. Get this craft, because that's how we control our own destinies, you know, is craft. I don't care what the craft is, you know. So the sooner you start that, the better. And I don't know what else to tell my 10-year-old kid, you know, just, you know, be ready for what comes next. Unpredictable. Life is very unpredictable.
Next question. Zie ik even staan? Ja.
Up there.
Hoi.
When you first played Silvio, how much of his characteristics, like the way he talks and walks, did you personally come up with, or was like personally you? And how much was from direction of David Chase? I'm curious about that.
When you first played Silvio, how much came from David Chase and how much did you find out yourself or came from yourself? From his way of moving and talking? And
TV's funny. You don't get a lot of direction. If you say the words correctly, they're moving on. there's no time for. And I didn't know this, of course. So after the first few weeks, I said to the other actors, you know, the director's not saying anything to me, you know. I must be fucking up or what, you know. He said, no. When the director doesn't speak to you, you're okay. You know, so you know that means you're not in the way. You're not doing something wrong. That's the only time they're going to talk to you, is when you're doing something wrong. I got some basic slight direction at first, which was basically less, do less. You know. There's the old story of the director and the actor. The director says to the actor, do less. And they do take after take. And finally, the actor says to the director, if I do any less, I won't be acting. And the director says, now you got it. So it was like that kind of, you know, just basic, do less, let the camera do it. But I had created the character myself. Very briefly, David Chase cast me as Tony Soprano. HBO then said to him, are you out of your fucking mind? This guy never acted before. We're about to invest like $30 million. I mean, HBO was nothing back then. They had a football show on and 3 old movies. You know, there was nothing. And they were about to make this huge investment in this crazy show. He wouldn't let David Chase cast me as the lead, thankfully for all of us. Cooler heads prevailed. So then David says to me, I'll tell you what, they won't let me cast you as Tony. You can play any other part you want. And at that point, it sort of hit me. I was like, wait a minute. I'm starting to feel guilty about taking an actor's job here. I really shouldn't do this because I watched my wife go to class after class and off-Broadway. I mean, you know, here I'm coming off the street, you know, half a hippie guitar player. All of a sudden, I'm taking an actor's job. I said, I feel guilty about it. And he says, I'll tell you what, then. I will write you in a part that doesn't exist. You're not taking anybody's job. So, true. So he says, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd never thought about acting, but I had thought about writing, and I had even thought about directing. I said, I have a treatment that I wrote about an independent hitman named Silvio Dante. And he runs a Copacabana type of club, the old style club, big bands, Jewish Catskills comics, dancing girls. He kind of lives in the past, but it's set in modern day. And in the club, you know, the 5 families have their own tables, and the commissioner, the police commissioner, and you know, the mayor, and it's kind of a mob Casablanca. Huh? So David Chase was like, "Oh, that's interesting. All right, let me think about that." And he talked to HBO, and he came back and said, "Well, we can't afford that, but we'll make it a strip club."
Yeah.
Hi, Stephen. I'm Andrew from Asbury Park, New Jersey. I'm just wondering if you felt like you've lost fans over the past 4 years, just because of your, you know, political beliefs and stuff, and how you dealt with that, you know, with what's been going on in our country and where we're from.
But you mean, did he lose fans because not taking political stance?
No, because he does.
Oh, he does. Oh, do you think you lost fans last years because of your taking political stance?
Well, I tried.
The last 4 years.
That's 4 years.
Yeah, I really made a huge attempt to stay out of it while Satan was in charge. I didn't mention his name once. If you look at my Twitter feed, never mentioned his name for years, you know. It just seemed redundant to me, you know, which is why even the Soulfire albums and Summer Sorcery albums are my first non-political albums. And the tours were based on trying to find common ground, and everybody we're divided enough. Let's use music as our common ground. I mean, I was really trying. And then, you know, that last year or so, I lost it completely. And I realized the Republican Party has got to go, okay? There's no way to save them at this point, okay? I grew up, my father was an ex-Marine, Goldwater Republican, okay? Which was Goldwater was the guy who invented the modern conservative movement and that whole right wing, which is now taken over, although it's been totally perverted. So I grew up with that, and I knew exactly what that was, you know. But at this point, you got a Republican Party that doesn't believe in democracy, that doesn't believe in equality, that doesn't believe in science. I mean, they're destroying our country, and we're in big trouble right now, very big trouble. So I just lost it, and I was like, you know, Republicans have got to. The only way to save the Republican Party is to vote them all out of office, every one of them, you know. And so. You know, I hear about it in the Twitterverse, okay? I hear about it in Twitter. You know, I get all of those guys coming after me. Did I lose fans? I don't give a shit, you know? You know. I don't need Republicans as my fans at this point, you know? I mean, anybody still calling themselves a Republican, you got to be mentally ill. I'm sorry. I mean, you know, there's something wrong with you, you know. So it's not like the old party's going to come back. The entire Republican Party is guilty of collaboration with treason right now. Treason. They are trying to topple our government. You know, they saw it January 6th. You know, they literally tried to topple the government, you know, and that malignant orangutan is still walking around, okay, with his orange fucking tan instead of an orange jumpsuit. He should be in an orange jumpsuit, you know. I'm more pissed off at the Democrats right now than I am at the Republicans, you know, because we're not doing a fucking thing about it, you know. And I love Joe Biden, and I root for him every single day. I really do, but he's the wrong guy, okay? And just like Obama was the wrong guy at the wrong time, and I love Obama. Obama being elected was one of the 2 most incredible political moments of my life. The other was watching Mandela walk out of jail, you know. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. Electing a black man in such a prejudiced country as our country, and we are very prejudiced, as you can see now. But they're the wrong guys, you know? We need warriors, and we don't have them, okay? And I keep asking, where are the tough, good guys, You know, we don't have any. You know, and we elected an attorney general who's just, you know, very weak. And right now we're about to lose our democracy. We're this close. 21 states have already passed legislation. You may have heard about voter suppression, okay? That's what's going on. They don't want black people to vote anymore. They don't want, you know, Latinos to vote anymore. So they have this voter suppression. They're doing everything they can to suppress the votes. That's not the worst of it. The worst of it is something called nullification, which has already passed many states. Nullification means no matter who you vote for, the state legislature can change that. Throw out the votes and put in whoever they want. This is called fascism. This is called authoritarianism. This is not democracy anymore, you know? And that's where we're at right now, you know? So do I care about these people, you know, buying my records? No.
You are very interesting on Twitter, though, because sometimes you are very polite and you take all your time to answer, and then suddenly it seems like Sil takes your phone. You fucking phone.
No, because they, you know, sometimes they attack you, you know, in a disrespectful way. I'm not going to let that slide. I don't let it slide, you know, like some people do. I'm like, you be disrespectful to me, I'll be disrespectful back twice as bad, you know?
Next question. Okay. One more after this one, or one more including this one?
We got a couple. Quick.
Trivial question. You grew up in Italian neighborhoods, Italian inheritance you have. What did you eat on Sunday? Because on Sunday for Italians, food is very, very special. I know it's happening.
What do I do on Sunday?
What did you eat on Sunday?
What do I eat on Sunday?
Yeah.
You mean now or in his youth?
In your youth.
Well, growing up, you know, it was when the whole family was intact was wonderful because we would go to church, and then just a block or two away, we walk over to my grandmother's house, and the whole family would have, you know, supper, you know, from 2 to 7. You know, basically, you know, you have like, you know, you would eat, and it was a wonderful time, you know, to keep, you know, when the whole family was together, you know. But when the grandparents go, things start falling apart. So I don't have any rituals or habits anymore that are fun, you know.
Well, you do have, because in Princess of Little Italy, it seems like you're in Italy.
In the song Princess of Little Italy, it seems like you're in Italy.
Oh, well, artistically, yeah, I'm there, yeah.
2 short ones, really short ones?
Quick.
Are there any bands, artists from Holland you like or maybe even admire?
Are there any bands from Holland you like or admire?
The golden
earring.
When they were the golden earrings,
Yeah.
they were even hipper. Daddy, buy me a girl. It's a classic.
And they're from this city.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Ah. They're great.
Last one, Daniel.
You talked about the Lost Boys album. I always wonder who were these guys. I thought they were the guys from Bon Jovi, but that's not.
No.
You wrote in the book, it's Nicky Hopkins, the rock band,
I called Nicky Hopkins.
Jordan.
It was going to be Steve Jordan, Nicky Hopkins, this bass player Jimmy. I can't.
Sopranos' second soundtrack, you released Affection.
Yeah, I don't know how David Chase heard the record, to tell you the truth. I really don't. I don't remember.
You used a song from a record of you that wasn't
released. Yeah. One or two, I think, on that soundtrack. Yeah. So that's the only place that they exist.
I think the Expendable Street comes from me. It comes to the speakers in the airplane.
Yeah.
So there are some songs circulating from that album.
Yeah. It's just because of David Chase, you know. But yeah, one of these days I'll get it out because it's.
You told it on the concert during the Sofa. One day I will release the album.
Yeah.
It's like the rock and roll rebel song. You recorded
Right.
in Brussels, I know.
Right.
For me, on my wall there are 2 days. 16 16 October 92, I was at the Krugerman. I was there.
Right.
Really, that's one of the-
We finally got it out, right? We finally put it on the Rock and Roll Rebel. I named the whole package after that song.
Because I love the third verse, but we keep it.
That's a fan right over here.
He's a
That's
fan. He's a fan. Yeah,
That's a fan. All right. Well, anyway.
One for the road, please.
one for the last question.
Yeah, the last one. Okay, in the mid-80s, your brother Bruce released a song, maybe you know it, Born USA. It was the most misinterpreted song, because your friend used it for his election at the time, Reagan. But in the 95, Bruce played it acoustic during his Ghost of Joe tour, and it makes the words more vivid. Have you ever think about to release an acoustic album?
You know, people have brought that up actually. You know, and I did one song.
Time of your life.
Was that it? No, on the.
Daniel,
on one of these
which
box
song?
sets.
Come on, Daniel.
There's an acoustic version of something. I forget. But anyway, I should.
There's a piano version of inside of
No. I can't think of what song it is, but I did one. A friend of mine who was working on the box set said, "Why don't you do that?" So I did one song just to see how it would go, and I put it on one of these box sets. I don't know which one. He'll figure it out in a minute. But I should do that. I should do that because it does change the. It changes the way people perceive the song. I agree with you. You know.
in 72 you did with South.
Not that. Another one.
If you have any questions, Daniel will answer them.
Yes.
Ladies and
Talk to my
gentlemen,
manager. Thank you.
Stevie Van Zandt.